Hello, friends, and welcome to the Handyman Success Podcast. Our mission is to teach and inspire by sharing the stories and insights of our guests. Whether you're a prospective, new, or seasoned handyman business owner, you will learn practical business tips you can apply today and be inspired that you can reach your goals and create a better tomorrow. I'm one of your hosts, Jason Call, owner of Handyman Marketing Pros. We equip small, family-owned handyman businesses with modern websites and SEO to help grow their businesses online. I'm joined by my co-host, Alan Lee, who has built his handyman business to a point where it runs without him. He now teaches others, step by step, how to do the same thing through his Handyman Journey business coaching. You can learn more about our marketing and coaching services by scheduling a call with us on handymansuccess.net. So whether you're patching drywall, sitting in the office, or making your third run to Home Depot, we invite you to pull up a chair and sit with us on another episode of the Handyman Success Podcast. Today, we are joined by Todd Smith with Smitty's Handyman, located in Cameron Park, California. One of my personal favorite business names. I think it's got a lot of flow and a lot of positives going for it. Smitty's. It's very catchy. Thank you so much, Todd, for joining us today. If you don't mind, give us a little snapshot of your handyman business, how long you've been in business, just a little lay of the land for us.
Yeah, well, thank you. I appreciate you guys having me. I've known both of you for, I guess, a little bit over a year. Jason, got a hold of you, I think about a year ago this time for some help. And Alan, I've watched his videos and seen a lot of his podcasts but we just recently got a chance to really get to know each other down in San Diego. So, anyhow, as far as my story goes with my business, I always start with where I started before that. For 22 years, I was a educator. I taught in 5 years in Catholic schools, and then 17 years in public schools. I taught everything from third grade to eighth grade, mostly middle school. And in 2022, I had thought about changing careers and was just not real happy with the public education system, and knew that I needed a change. And I'd always kind of had in the back of my mind the possibility of opening a handyman business as a kind of semi-retirement type situation. And as a result of the way things kind of were unfolding, I decided to do that sooner than I anticipated. And so I started my business in 23, at the beginning of 23. I'd kind of ramped up November of 22 after I decided I was going to do it, and started putting things together for it. And then, January 2023 was my first day, right? And in terms of, what I had up until that point, like I said, I put most of my time into my teaching profession, and but as a homeowner, I was always doing projects around the house. I have a really good friend who's a retired firefighter now. He was, a active firefighter, actually, most of our time as friends. And so he had quite a bit of time, and the two of us would, do projects at each other's houses. I had several neighbors that we've helped each other throughout the years doing things. And I've just always, especially on a teacher's salary, had to figure things out, right? I didn't have the money to be able to pay people. And so over, 25 years as a homeowner, learned a lot. Definitely would not qualify all of that as, specifically high experience in any one area, but felt kind of like I was a jack of all trades. And the reason I was able to get into it, I didn't just jump right into it. I had a friend of mine I taught with who knew actually a handyman in our area and had recently started and had a similar story to mine. He was in the tech industry as an engineer, and had done it for a couple decades, and was ready to get out of that and try something new. And so this other friend I taught with told me, hey, why don't you get a hold of him and see if he'd be interested in talking with you and find out what you can about the business. And at that point, I had already watched several of Alan's videos, a couple other people online as well, and had this idea that I was starting to get more serious about it. But I called my friend. His name is Paul, and he's been a mentor. Um, and his business is Total Advantage Handyman, and he's out of El Dorado Hills. And I was kind of reluctant to talk to him initially. Felt that he may not want to have a whole lot of discussion with me since we're in the same area. Called him up, told him who I was, how I knew him, who the referral was, and he was already expecting my call. I didn't know that, and he was more than generous. He was a blessing. He talked to me about anything and everything. I got on the phone with him one evening, the first time I called him, and I think we talked probably close to an hour, if not maybe a little over an hour. And at the end of our call, he said, "You got any more questions? Give me a call." But his general overall message to me um, is, my concern was I didn't have enough experience at the time to start, and he reassured me that I probably had more experience than most handymen that you'll find on Nextdoor. And the other thing that he suggested is that it really comes down to a few basic concepts and principles that are really important. One is, first and foremost, be honest. Show up when you say you're going to show up. If you can't, contact them, let them know that something's changed, and under promise, over deliver. And I've tried to do those things. And initially, when he told me those things, and that I mean, there's a couple other things, but that was the general concept. And I had a hard time believing that it could be boiled down to those few things. And here I am on just beginning year 3, and finding that reality is that's truly is a big part of it, right? And it does separate, and he had said the same thing. It'll separate you from probably 85% of the competition. And also said there's plenty of work out there. He's really busy, and he told me what his journey was and how much he'd made um, the past year. So 2 years ago, he told me that what he was bringing in. Since I haven't talked to him, I don't know if it'd be okay to tell you what his salary, but I can tell you, as a teacher for 22 years, he was making well more than I was after 22 years of teaching, right? Which that in itself was a big positive for me, and had talked to my wife about that, and because that was one of the biggest things is, can I bridge this gap to retirement and make a living doing this? And as a result of the information I got from him, plus the videos that I'd watched, gave me the confidence to, and hearing from Alan several different times, and a couple other videos, is you just gotta start. You gotta take the first step, right? And so, yeah, that's what I did.
Awesome. Yep. Thanks so much for sharing that, Todd. I think a couple big takeaways for me, and I know Alan did this, is don't be afraid to contact your other local handyman. It sounds like you kind of hit the jackpot with Paul, if I remember correctly, of just being really generous and talking about the market and earnings potential, the encouragement. So I know that's a topic that quite a few people have brought up is, hey, just have some conversations. There's going to be people that won't answer your call, won't return you, or, be like, why are you calling me? I'm not talking to you. But there's really good people out there, plenty of work, that are happy to talk to you and help you out. So always keep that as an option. And, we encourage people to do that. Alan did that himself. I know we've talked about that on the podcast. One, did you go full time into the handyman business, or did you have a transition period of that part-time, like doing it on the side. If you don't mind shedding a little light on what that transition to full-time was and how you knew when it was a good time to actually go full-time. I know that's a big topic that our listeners, everyone's trying to figure out. It's in the Facebook groups of how do I know when to just go full-time with the business?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a good question. So, when I left teaching, I left teaching mid-year actually, which is not a typical thing for teachers to do. Again, a lot of stories that are out there in the media is that that public education is having a really hard time as a result of COVID, which that's not untrue. However, there's been a ton of challenges regardless of COVID. It was really struggling, had a lot of challenges within it for I'd say 5 to 8 years prior to that, and so I had already in my mind knew that I needed to come up with some alternative. If things were continuing as they were, I knew that I wasn't going to be able to, as a teacher, you got to get to at least 55 to retire. And when I left, I think I was 48, 49 maybe, and knew just even the thought of those 6 years. And even if at that, if I retired at 55, my retirement would be puny. It would not be really substantial. And so the primo date or the target date that as a teacher you're trying to hit is 63. And that to me seemed even more preposterous. There's no way I'm getting another 14, 15 years. So anyhow, some things that happened that, again, I just was not going to be complicit with and knew that, it was starting to affect just my health and knew, this isn't worth it. Um, I'm going to pull the plug now and gave myself a few months to kind of reassess. And, to be honest, I hadn't anticipated leaving them. And I knew it was probably soon, but not then. And anyhow, so I kind of had to reevaluate where am I going and what do I want to do? And it's been a long time since I put any thought into that, right? And even though I knew that was eventually probably going to happen, and I had some thoughts, I'd sit and have talks with my wife about, and actually she or is a teacher as well, and both of us had the same thoughts of we don't, neither one of us can foresee doing this to 63, right? And every time we talk about it, so what would we do? What can we do? What do we want to do? It's just I think really hard after 20 plus years doing something to envision what does that look like, right? So anyhow, after giving myself a few months, I decided, I went and got a book called What Color Is Your Parachute? It's been out for years and years and years, and they update it every year and did all the work in that book to try to help direct me into what I wanted to do. And oddly enough, everything that came out kept telling me I should be a teacher or I should be doing something outdoors with my hands, right? And so I was like, well, I guess it's leading me that direction. But again, at that time, felt like I didn't have enough information. Didn't think I'd be able to make enough money to make the transition, and so I actually looked for a job for I don't know probably 8 months. Did all kinds of interviews. I can't tell you how many applications I put out, and in my mind, felt like I I got a lot to offer. I've been a teacher for 22 years. There's a lot of I know that there was a lot of transferable skills. But was just finding that all these interviews I was going to, and I was glad I was getting interviews, but especially the ones that I knew I was one of the finalists, it seemed like there was very little I could do to have them not see me with the teacher hat on. It's just like it was this pigeonhole that I tried even, intentionally to with the answers that I gave and the way I kind of framed myself to try to move away from that. It's hard to do that because eventually they come back to your experience, right? And you're a teacher. And so anyhow, I got a few offers, but the the job itself was, it was okay. It wasn't totally the thing that I I wanted to do. And I tried to apply just the jobs that I really would like to do. But, after 8 months, you start to widen scope a little bit. And I decided, actually, I had a friend of mine that was a former colleague teacher that I taught with that knew that I was looking for jobs, and she was at a local charter school, and asked me if I wanted to give teaching another shot. And this charter school was set up differently. Without going through all of that, I she convinced me that give it a shot, and maybe this will be a different experience. And my wife was on the other shoulder saying, "I don't know as if this is going to be a good thing. You left for a reason, and let's just keep the course." And I decided, part of me just wants to know, maybe if I tried a different school, different setting, it would be better. And so anyhow, I ended up, they had already started the school year. I guess that was 22, and started in October. And again, without going through all the specifics, there was already a couple of teachers that had left before I got there, from September to October, which wasn't a great sign. And by the time I left, I was there for all of a month, and two other teachers left before I left, and for a lot of the same reasons I left the first time. So anyhow, so at that point, I was really now starting to look at the handyman route, and I did jump in after. Again, I did a bunch of research. It's just kind of the way I do things, and again, talking with Paul several times, and the numbers seemed to line up. And then it was just at the edge of the cliff and jump, right? And it was the last decision to make, right? And I don't know if that's the best choice to make. I think the way Alan did it, definitely, if you have that opportunity to try it as a side hustle and do things on the side. There's a guy that was down with us in San Diego, and he had just recently started, and that's kind of the way was doing things, and found that, and he had a really good job that he was with, but he had always kind of had this thought of doing the handyman thing, and uh, and tried it out, and was finding he's having a lot of success, and then he was able to make that transition. So I know it comes out of, you know, the other handymen I met in San Diego. It was good to hear their stories as well. Everybody has a little bit different story. I think that's probably the easiest or the safest way to do is a slow transition. But I'm sure there's other people that are in my situation that at some point you got to just leap, right? And so that's what I did.
Yep. Sometimes you just got to make that leap for sure. And I want to talk a little bit more about that San Diego trip here a little bit later, because I think people will be interested in that. But when you first started out, like, what did that look like? How did you get? Do you remember your first client? How did you get that client? And what did you end up charging for that job? Like, how did you come up with a number of what to charge, and then even find your first client? Like, what did that look like?
So my very first client, I, and I got I built a Google web page, and it was pretty simple. And again, I was advised from Paul, my mentor, and he was telling me he got on Nextdoor and put a site up there. He got on Facebook, put a site up there. I did both of those things, and I think within a week or so, I had my first call, and my very first call was I had a couple from down in Folsom that they had a couch where it was, I think it was an IKEA type couch. I mean, it was that type of setup in terms of how it was put together. Um, and the foot had broken out, and it had a wood insert in it. And they wanted me to come down and see if I could fix it, right? And and this wood insert, was a really specific thread on it, and it was a specific size. And I figured, I should be able to go to Home Depot and find this. And it took me probably 2 days of tracking down this wood insert for this thing. But I was determined. And in terms of pricing, I'd come up through reading your book, Alan, and making that formula as best I could. And I think my hourly rate, to start was, I think I started at 70. Um, and I remember talking with Paul about that as well, about hourly rates. And I had asked him what his was, and he told me 90. And again, as a teacher, I was like, holy cow. Right. And, and we had that discussion. And one of the things that he told me is, and I told him, I'd never pay that. He says, you're absolutely right, Todd. And what you need to understand is you're not your own target customer, and you probably never would be, right? You're, you're a teacher and you're a do-it-yourself guy, right? So you're not the guy I'm trying to work for, right? Um, and so that was kind of a hard concept to get, but anyhow, so I started there and told them what my price was. And I probably put in 3 times the amount of time for that job that I actually billed them for, because I just felt guilty that, it's like, this shouldn't be taking this long. And I got it done through, I eventually had to re-drill it and a little wood putty and mostly wood glue, and went down and put it in, and felt good that, I was able to help them out. But at the same time, it was a huge learning lesson for me of, again, another Paulism. Um, there are jobs that I can do versus jobs I should do. And again, up here, I understood that, but until I started getting into the handyman business, you kind of learn pretty quickly what he meant by that. And I continue to find that's a really important question to ask yourself on my jobs. And actually, Alan and I talked about that during our weekend. And that's part of the process of where I'm heading into right now, is doing more of that, of trying to narrow and filter and focus on um, where to put my efforts and what services to offer, and reevaluating my pricing. Paul had originally suggested to me, said, when you're first starting out, I did the same. I charged hourly, simply because of the fact you just don't have a good sense of how long things take. And and if you don't do it that way, you're probably gonna underestimate or overestimate, and either way, it's not a good thing. So better just to do hourly. And so essentially, my first 2 years, that's what I've been doing. But realized at the end of this past year, that I definitely have to transition into pricing by the job, because it just financially, you kind of outgrow that system. And as Alan and I talked about on the plane, that you're starting to take money out of your own pocket, because as you're becoming more efficient, unless you're charging more by the hour, which you have to do anyway, right? You're you're charging less for the same job because you're getting more efficient at it. So you're essentially like punishing yourself for being better at it, right?
Yeah.
So,
And there's inherent flexibility in hourly rates, and it's where most people start because you just don't have the experience. But as you get that experience and you get good at estimating and getting a good idea of how long it would take you, and then you get better at that when you price by the project. Yeah, like you said, you're not short selling yourself on a 2-hour project that you've gotten so good you can do it in 1 hour, but the value to your ideal client, you can charge them 2 hours that you just bill by that project. So inherently, most people start out hourly. There's a lot of flexibility there. Also, one encouragement too for all our listeners is the lowest price you'll ever charge is going to be when you're first getting started. You'll make the least amount of money, the least hourly rate, so don't be discouraged. My first quote that I gave as a business person, the guy shot his hand across the table so fast that his shoulder about popped out of his socket. I mean, it was just way too low. So that's totally normal. Be encouraged that the lowest rates you'll charge is when you're first getting started, and there's only room for improvement. So on that note, like your pricing journey, Todd, so you mentioned kind of switching to like transitioning to the more pricing by the project. I know you and Alan spent a good amount of time on chatting, going to San Diego, to keep dropping this. It's almost like a hint, man. It's like the buildup is real, but
Stick around to hear the story.
yeah. So you mentioned, $70 an hour is where you got started. Your mentor is at 90. Like where are you at now as far as, are you charging by the project? Is there a back end hourly rate that's higher than 70? If you don't mind giving a little snapshot of where your pricing is today.
I'm at 85 right now. I bumped twice in just the 2 years. I went a full year before I did anything. And then I think it was like March maybe, or maybe it was last February. Um, I moved. I went from wherever I was. I think I went up $10. So I was at 70. I went to 80, I think, and then by summer I realized, I I went up to 85, which was great. And I actually didn't really see. I didn't see any drop of business, but to be honest, and I should have a better idea. And it's not any fault of yours, Jason. Actually, it's as a result of you. Um, so, like I said, my first year, I just had my website, and then I had a Facebook page and Nextdoor, right? That was essentially my marketing, in addition to telling friends and family, right? And trying to have them spread the word as much as possible, getting reviews, all that stuff, right? And then, my second year, I went with you, Jason, I felt okay with the progress I made. Never had ever been in business before. You know, I felt, I kind of met the goal that I had for that first year. Although, I think most handymen wouldn't necessarily see it as the success that I did. Again, my vision, I haven't said this yet, was mostly, or maybe I did, is to, with my handman business, was essentially, I wanted to do it until I was about 58, maybe 59. And then at that point, decide, um, do I want to keep doing it? Do I want to start dialing it back? Do I want to do it at all? Right. And that in combination with my pension from as a teacher, right? That, I, and my wife's, that I could make that work. Right. So I was never really looking at wanting to expand my business. I just always thought of it, I'll be a solo handyman. And, I'll make the tweaks that I need to. But and kind of my goal was if I can make what Paul made his past year, in the next couple of years, and if I'm making that money, I can sock away probably as much or not more than I was as a teacher, and that'll bridge the gap. And that was sufficient with me, right? And so that mindset had a couple things going. One, I didn't have the same pressure at that time to support my family that many other guys do, right? I had some other things in place. I knew that I would um, gain more experience and get quicker over time, but I didn't feel probably the same. Not even probably, I know now, the same intensity of making that all happen now, right? And so that's just kind of helped me with not, in one way, to not feel as much pressure, but at the same time, I haven't pivoted it as probably as quickly as most other people would at this point. And so anyhow, I'm forgetting our question. I got off track.
Where you're at with pricing?
Pricing. So yeah, I'm at 85. But two things. One is, unfortunately, I found out in August that my wife has decided that she wants to get a divorce. And um, so there's that. And then also going on this trip with Alan down to San Diego actually happened at probably the perfect time, at the end of this January. So, I found out in August of 2024 about the divorce, and my wife's uh, been gone since then. And um, so, in terms of pricing, I've realized, I'm not on the same path anymore. just cost of living, especially in our area, is not cheap. We've been in our house for 23 years. And so we refinanced. There's COVID years, it was really cheap to refinance. And I don't think I'm going to be able to stay in the house and keep that mortgage because I'll have to refinance. And so I got to be, now that flame is under my butt more. And so I'm now feeling that pressure, and I don't have the same resources that I had prior to that. So I definitely have to look at getting out of the hourly pricing. I have to do it by the job. And so going down to San Diego to talk to 8 other handymen, and getting their perspective and finding out what they're doing, and seeing that very few of them, except for the guys that are newly starting off, and even some of them learn right away to price by the job. And the other thing is, I also learned, and I think your listeners will be happy to hear somebody being honest about it. I don't have, there was 9 of us there. I would put myself definitely in the bottom third in terms of skills and speed. Um, and realizing again with what my original plan was, that was okay, right? But where I'm at now, I'm realizing that my time frame is now shorter in terms of what I need to have happen if I plan to retire, and I don't want to work forever. And I don't want to work until I can't work anymore because my body gives up, right? And so I have to reevaluate things, and so that conference, it was really good to hear what other guys are doing and their pricing. And there's a guy, Patrick from Pittsburgh, has his price schedule listed on his website. Um, and got a couple other people's. Alan sent his price list, and I know that I got to transition, and I need to do that sooner than later. And so when we came back from San Diego, I called up Paul, my mentor, and talked to him and said, "Hey, so the good news and bad news is that I start with the bad news is that Paul, unfortunately, has had some of his own personal trials and tribulations. And he's definitely, he's like 10 years older than me, 10 to 12, I think. And he was already talking to me about, he was planning on phasing out this year and definitely dialing it back. And as a result of some things that happened, he has decided that he actually is just gonna need to pull the plug and stop the handyman thing. And I'm sorry to see that he's having to go through all that. I've been extremely fortunate that he's been so helpful, and he's in my area, and he's already talked to me about, that he'd like to help me out and help me with some of his customers coming on with me, which I would really appreciate. So again, that transition is really important to do sooner than later, because I talked to Alan as well about this, just, transitioning from hourly to by the job. I definitely need to do it with some thought, and not just do this kind of abrupt change without some type of way to help my customers understand, because they deserve that. So anyhow, I don't know if there's, maybe I should ask before I show, but Paul asked me to, before we had a discussion, I talked to him about a variety of other things that we don't have time to talk about now, but he said before we talk about those things, and he's willing to help me, even though he's phasing out, he asked me to read a book. And after reading the book, then we'd sit down and talk more specifically about some of the changes that we need to make. And I think, Alan, that you had talked about it during our weekend, but I don't know if I'm in, what, if I should show it or say the name of it, or um, if is there any copyright things with that, or anything?
Say go for it. Yeah.
You can always edit it out. Um, So the E-Myth, have you read that on? Was you? I thought you had mentioned the same thing with a couple other guys that talked about it. Um, and I'm almost done with it. But I knew some of the information that's in there. Some of it's just, intuitive, but there's a lot that's not. And to make that transition to go from just, a single handyman to more of a business, I can definitely see all the information that's in there. There's a lot of reformatting and restructuring, reframing before you even get into it that you need to do to be successful. Because again, the thing to really, remember, even as a solo handyman, I think you have definitely a lifespan of your business before you start hitting the same challenges as every other business. And I think the statistics are, was it like 80 to 85% of all businesses fail within the first 5 years. And it's like 90% of all businesses failed by the first 10 years, right? Those are not good odds, right? And so, and the subtitle of the book is why most small businesses don't work and what to do about it, right? And so obviously if you don't identify that stuff, your chances of being that statistic are really high, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And thanks so much for sharing all that, Todd. Like, I just want to underscore, like, the personal trials. Business is not all sunshine and rainbows. Like, life happens, and most people are going through some magnitude of personal trial that we just don't know about. And as business owners, it's not as simple of an equation as having like a W-2 job, because especially as an owner operator, you've got to keep your sales going, your marketing going. You got to show up to the job on time. You got to provide good customer service. You can't be answering the phone like, "This is T. Smitty's Handyman. How can I help you?" Like, just totally down the dumps. You gotta rise above and kind of pull that courage up. So, thanks so much for sharing that. I think it'll be helpful to our listeners that if whatever you're going through, like, you're not alone, and life happens. All these wide range of things. So I do commend you for, keep it on, man. We're all here to help and support you. So really appreciate you being open about that, being vulnerable. If you're going through something out there, whether divorce or, other really emotional, taxing things, you're not alone. And you can definitely get through it. And that kind of leads into that E-Myth Revisited, which we talk about quite a bit on the podcast.
Yeah,
definitely recommended, I would say, alongside Profit First is my two bigger books. And of course, Alan's Handyman Pricing Handbook, Marketing Handbook, the Mindset. It's all good stuff. But it underscores the importance of that, because when you're going through these trials, when your finances change and you realize, shoot, I'm not charging enough, I'm not making enough, having a systematized business can help you create an equation to deal with that situation and with confidence, rather than just shooting from the hip. So, thanks for sharing all that, Todd, and the E-Myth Revisited.
All right, friends, that's a wrap of this episode of the Handyman Success Podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on your journey in building a thriving handyman business. We would love to hear your thoughts on this episode. Whether you learned something new or you're facing challenges that you're just not quite sure how to deal with, we would absolutely love to hear from you. We would love it if you would leave us a review, drop us a comment, or hit that like button telling us that you liked this episode. By doing this, you truly help and support us in creating more of these podcast episodes to help change the handyman industry to something amazing. And I want you to remember that you are not alone on this journey. Jason and I are here to help. If you need anything at all in regards to business or marketing, you can reach out to either Jason or I at handymansuccess.net. You can go over there right now and set up a free consultation call with either of us. We would absolutely love to talk with you. So thanks again for spending this time with us. And until next time, go out and be a blessing.